Coming up today, the South Korean Defense Ministry has briefed the National Assembly on the exact location for the deployment of THAAD. The U.S. missile defense system will be used to protect the South from North Korea's threats. The U.S. government has taken the first steps to completely lock North Korea out of the global financial system. Washington took similar steps against Iran a few years ago. First, at least one person is dead and scores more injured after a train smashes into a station in New Jersey. The station partially collapsed from the force of the impact. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Friday, the 30th of September. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Mark Broom. We have word that South Korea's government has settled on a new location for the THAAD missile defense system. Let's not waste any more time connecting to our Kim Hyun-bin, who's standing by at the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul. So, Hyun-bin, what are you hearing?
Oh, that's right, Mark. Defense Minister Han Min-gu has told lawmakers that the THAAD battery will be stationed at the Lotte Sky Hill Country Club in the northern part of Seongju, Gyeongsang-Buk-do Province. Now, the decision comes after a survey of two other possible candidate locations. The golf course lies 296 kilometers southeast of Seoul and is around 680 meters above sea level. Now, the location is far from residential areas in response to Seongju residents' concerns about the potential health problems posed by THAAD's radar system. Now, when the decision is finalized, the deployment is likely to face opposition from residents of the nearby town of Kimcheon, who had threatened to protest if the golf course were selected. Now, another barrier the defense minister faces is cost. Now, the golf course is valued at over $90 million, and the government will have to gain parliamentary approval for such a large budget outlay. Now, the defense minister is scheduled to make an official announcement at 2 p.m. Korea time. Now, that is expected to be deployed by the end of next year to better protect South Korea from North Korea's missile and nuclear threats. And that's all I have for now. I have more updates throughout the day.
Yes, and we'll be connecting again with our Kim Hyun-bin at 2 p.m. Presumably, because that's when the announcement is going to be made on the THAAD deployment to that area of Korea. Now, turning now to the latest move to come down hard on Pyongyang for its continual provocations. The United States is stepping up efforts to block North Korea from accessing the international banking system as punishment for the regime's recent stream of nuclear bomb tests and missile launches. Gwon-swa reports.
Still not enough. The U.S. is further turning up the heat on North Korea's nuclear and missile ambitions, introducing a bill that aims to shut the regime out of the global banking system. Representative Matt Salmon, who proposed the legislation, said North Korea's nuclear program has to be stopped by, quote, preventing specialized financial messaging services to or direct or indirect access to such messaging services for Pyongyang's banks and financial entities. These services are necessary for global financial transactions by institutions as well as individuals. This means services such as the world's leading provider of secure financial messaging services, Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, or SWIFT, could even be sanctioned if the North uses it for cross-border transactions with foreign banks. More than 11,000 financial institutions in over 200 countries use SWIFT. Before sanctions were lifted on Iran under its nuclear deal with world powers, Iranian banks had been disconnected from the service, which had a massive impact on Tehran's gas and oil exports. The new bill on North Korea includes a requirement that the president personally sanction those accommodating North Korea's central bank or other financial bodies with such financial services 90 days after the legislation's enactment. Kwon-swa, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's National Assembly is in a state of paralysis for a fifth straight day, with the ruling Saenuri Party continuing to boycott all parliamentary business. The party's floor leader, Jung Jin-sok, says his top priority is restoring parliamentary democracy. He said the ruling party will only enter into negotiations with the floor leaders of the two opposition parties if they acknowledge that Assembly Speaker Jung Se-kyun violated parliamentary law. The ruling party says Speaker Jung abandoned his neutrality by helping the opposition parties pass a dismissal motion last week for the sitting agriculture minister. The opposition parties called on the ruling party to end its boycott immediately so Parliament can get back to normal and an audit can proceed. Korea's airlines are set to benefit from China's week-long National Day holiday, which starts on Saturday. The reservation rate for flights between China and Korea stood at almost 90% for Korean Air during the period from September 24th to October 10th. That's up 2.7 percentage points from last year's holiday. Asiana Airlines said its booking rates for routes between China and Korea are at nearly 89% for the September 30th to October 3rd period. Its flights from Beijing and Shanghai to destinations in Korea are fully booked, completely full, while flights from Hangzhou are over 99% full. It's similar for budget carriers. Jeju Air says flights from China to Korea from September 30th to October 5th are almost sold out. Up to 240,000 Chinese tourists are expected to visit Korea this year, up from 203,000 last year. Now, experts are saying that the chemical concentration levels in recently recalled toothpaste are too low to pose a health risk. The recall reignited fears about chemical ingredients after chemicals used in some humidifier disinfectants were also found in some famous toothpaste brands here in Korea. Hwang Ho-jun has a story.
The chemophobia that started with the toxic humidifier disinfectant scandal is resurfacing again. A massive recall was announced this week after CMIT, MIT. The chemicals used in some toxic humidifier disinfectants were also found in popular toothpaste brands. However, some experts say the levels of CMIT, MIT in the products pose no threat to human health. They also say the chemical is different from the one that caused the deaths and illnesses in the oxy-Reckitt-Benckiser disinfectant scandal. That chemical was PHMG. According to the Dow Chemical Company, CMIT, MIT are usually used in paints, household cleaners, and personal care products, and as they are found in tiny concentrations, they are not usually considered dangerous. The Ministry of Food and Drug Safety said the recalled toothpaste contained minuscule amounts of CMIT, MIT. Europe's maximum permissible level is more than 3,000 times higher than that, whereas for Dow Chemical Company, it's more than 11,000 times. However, some consumers have accused the government of not having strict enough regulations in place.
At this point, the government must clearly inform the public why the chemicals were prohibited for use in personal care products in the first place and regulate them accordingly.
The ministry said it will conduct an investigation and products that don't meet the standard will be immediately taken off the shelves. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's overall industrial output edged down on month in August. However, if it hadn't been for a sharp drop in auto production, last month would have looked a lot more positive. Shin Se-min reports.
Korea's overall industrial output dropped into negative territory last month, falling 0.1% on month in August. Statistics Korea says that while output in the mining, manufacturing, gas and electricity sectors jumped 2.3% on month, it was offset by a sharp decline in auto production. The 17% slump in vehicle production was mainly due to partial strikes at Hyundai Motor and Renault Samsung. The business sentiment figure stayed relatively low at 71 for August and September, while a figure gauging consumer purchasing power remained nearly flat at 101.7 this month. Retail sales went up 2% on month as the record heat wave boosted sales of privacy electronic goods like air conditioners. Factory output of semiconductors jumped 27.5% amid rising demand for mobile chips for the latest smartphone lineups from Samsung and Apple. The finance ministry isn't too optimistic about future data as the country is bogged down by lingering uncertainties at home and abroad. A potential rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve, the local automaker strikes, Samsung's Galaxy Note 7 recall and the newly imposed anti-graft law are all expected to have an impact on Korea's production and consumer demand in the foreseeable months. 신세민, Arirang News.
Now, in the United States, at least one person is dead and more than 100 injured, some of them seriously, after a commuter train crashed into a station in New Jersey, situated just across the river from New York. The White House says the investigation is ongoing, but terrorism cannot be ruled out. Park Jong-hong reports.
Witnesses say the morning rush hour train never slowed down before it smashed into a concrete barrier at the end of the track and plowed into Hoboken Station. The governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, says the engineer in the train crash was seriously hurt, but is well enough to cooperate with the investigation. Pressed on why the accident happened, Christie said it was too early to speculate. He said the only thing known for now is that the train came in at a much higher speed than normal. The White House said it's not aware of any evidence the crash was caused by terrorism, but it's not ruling out the possibility.
This is something that the National Transportation Safety Board is continuing to look at, so I think it's too soon to rule that out, but at this point I'm not aware of any evidence that would raise those kinds of concerns at this point.
Hundreds of emergency workers spent the morning shuttling in and out of the station to help the injured. The victims were carried to ambulances on stretchers, and several passengers had to be pulled out of the wreckage. Hoboken Station, built more than a century ago, was a scene of devastation, with part of its metal roof collapsed and mangled steel and shattered glass on the ground. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
Now, Hillary Clinton has taken a lead in 5 key swing states following the first U.S. presidential debate, with just over 5 weeks to go until the big day, Election Day. According to public policy polling, Clinton had solid leads over Donald Trump in Colorado, Pennsylvania and Virginia, and slight leads in Florida and North Carolina. According to this poll as well, she has approval ratings ranging from 48 to 51% to Trump's 43 to 45%. Clinton also took the lead in hypothetical 4-way races that include the Libertarian and Green Party candidates. Analysts attribute the latest numbers from this public policy polling poll to Clinton's performance and Trump's underwhelming debut during the first debate between the two candidates. Now, we've been taking a look at Korea-UK relations all of this week as Arirang TV launched on British satellite services on Tuesday. One of the closest links between the countries is the Korean War. After the United States, Britain sent the second largest number of Allied troops to help the South during the war. But unfortunately, the Korean War is not that commonly known in the UK. Kwon Jang-oh, who is in London, had the chance to meet with some of the British heroes that came to South Korea's aid at its time of greatest need. Let's take a look.
The UK provided the second largest number of troops to the United Nations forces during the Korean War, sending over 80,000 soldiers. But it was also the ally with the second highest death toll at 1,106. And yet in Britain, that conflict is often referred to as the Forgotten War, coming so soon after 2 world wars.
The public had been fed up with war itself. There wasn't the television coverage or the media coverage like there is nowadays.
Sergeant Alan Guy served in the Royal Army Medical Corps, and he arrived in Korea in 1952, where he spent the next 20 months providing medical assistance to his fellow soldiers. But when he returned home, he found few who cared.
Arrived in the middle of the night. There was nobody there to greet me. I went to the local, there were no buses. I lived 5 miles from the railway station. I went to the local police station and said, "Can you help me to get home?" And they said, "No, you're a soldier, walk."
Lance Corporal Michael Griffin was a machine gunner for the Royal Norfolk Regiment, and he experienced a similar homecoming.
Nobody knew a lot about the Korean War. There was a little bit in the newspapers, but it was such a long way off.
Both were humble young soldiers, and the lack of recognition didn't concern them much at the time. But as the years went by, it became more disconcerting.
It was the memorial that really upset me, that we hadn't got our government hadn't produced a memorial. I don't think they realised that we killed more people than the whole of the Iraq, Afghanistan and Falkland War put together.
Sergeant Guy and members of the British Korean Veterans Association campaigned for the construction of a public memorial in London. But it was only with the help of the Korean government, which offered to fund the project, that it finally became a reality. This monument was erected in 2014, 61 years after the end of the Korean War. London was the last capital city to establish such a memorial among the 16 Allied nations that had fought in the war under the UN flag. The monument was also a symbol of Korea's continued recognition of the service and sacrifice that British troops had made. And for Sergeant Guy and Lance Corporal Griffin, a confirmation that their efforts had not been in vain. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News, London.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Friday lunchtime here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for tuning in. We will be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Our next scheduled bulletin is coming up at 2 p.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.